Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Next Gen North podcast. Joining us today is JP Thor. He's our resident crypto and market expert. He'll be tuning in, or dialing in, I should say, every week and providing us with an update on all things crypto and markets. JP, where are you joining us from today?
Yeah, g'day, mate. I'm in Melbourne at the moment. Pulled in yesterday from the States. I was there on some work stuff. And I'm here to the weekend, and on Sunday I'll be flying the helicopter from Sydney, Lord Howe, Norfolk, and then into New Zealand for some filming we're doing over there. So you caught me at a good time.
Lovely. Just to set the scene a little bit, and for our new audience members that just don't know much about the crypto space, don't know much about yourself, what your journey was, how you got into crypto, that type of thing. If you could just provide us with a little bit of a scene setter, I think that'd be great to give some context to our listeners.
Yeah, cool. So I was playing around in the markets, FX markets, over 15 years ago. And then I discovered Bitcoin in August 2013. And I was very impressed at what it was trying to do. So I jumped into Bitcoin for about 6 months, went on a crazy run from $100 to $1,000. And I thought I was a genius. I told my family and friends to buy it. And then that became my journey, dealing with the volatility of Bitcoin since then. Full-time crypto since 2016. That's full-time building as well. So been building protocols and projects and investing and doing that for the last probably 8 years now. So definitely the markets. I monitor the markets every single day, and I've got a great perspective on it. Everything you can imagine that's happened in markets I've been involved in, especially on the crypto side, and made a lot of mistakes, had some winners, and I can back myself.
Great. So I guess just to dive into crypto itself, what do you sort of see as the most significant advantages of blockchain technology compared to, say, traditional financial systems?
Right, so you've got to understand what money is to answer that question. So I don't like actually using the word blockchain technology. I prefer to focus on exactly the product itself. And so Bitcoin is the main alpha of all of this industry, and it is essentially a digital gold. It's more scarce, it has better monetary properties, it has unforgeable costness, which means every single unit has to be bought at a fair market price or mined at a fair market price. That's unlike, say, fiat currencies where someone can produce them at zero cost or very low cost. So Bitcoin has just better monetary properties than gold, and it's a better money at being money. So if you think of what actually money is essentially value and value is your time and effort. So everyone has finite time. You live to about 80, 100 and you die, and everyone has finite effort, which means you can create economic output on the world using your time, your skills and experiences. So finite time multiplied by finite effort equals finite value. And you wish to store that value in a product or medium that can transport it across time and space. So create value in 2010, store it in a monetary asset that you can allow you to then basically extract that value and buy someone else's time and effort in 2020. So store time across value. And the second thing is across space. So, sell your time and effort in Darwin and then fly to LA and buy a coffee. So someone has to produce that coffee using their time and effort, which is finite. So the value allows you to basically store time and effort across time and space. And Bitcoin is just really good at doing that because it's globally available. Everyone uses it around the world. So it's great at storing value across space, and also excellent at storing value across time because of its monetary properties. So gold is really good at storing value across time, but really bad at storing value across space. Whereas cash money is excellent at storing value across space. You can fly around the world and use United States dollars basically anywhere. But it's terrible at storing value across time because it has very bad monetary properties. So Bitcoin just does both better. So that's why Bitcoin is the future of money. So if you approach the markets with that idea that Bitcoin is trying to be a better monetary asset, and allows you to have a really good perspective.
So it's sort of like the best of both worlds, I guess you could say. Best of all worlds.
Correct. Yeah. So then it's not a question about investing in Bitcoin. It's always a question about adopting Bitcoin. You're not using Bitcoin to make you rich overnight. You are utilizing the wealth preservation characteristics of Bitcoin for your own benefit, to store your value across time and space. So I always tell people, do not approach these markets with the idea you just want to invest. You just want to find this 10x, 100x pump and walk away back to fiat land. No, wrong attitude. You want to approach the markets with the idea that you're going to adopt this technology to give you a vehicle that you can utilize, a financial vehicle. So Bitcoin is just excellent at storing your value across time and space, and you should be adopting it with that perspective. So that's just Bitcoin. That's the alpha of the space. It's at any point, it's like 80 to 60% of all the value in crypto. It has 50 to 60% of all the daily volumes of crypto. It's the alpha of money. It's got the strongest Lindy effect. The Lindy effect means it's been around the longest, therefore it's going to be around for also the longest. A good explanation of Lindy effect is, Stu, is what music will you still be listening to in 200 years? Question for you. In 200 years' time, you pull up your Spotify, what music will still be on there?
The Beatles, probably. Beatles, Rolling Stones, you know, those
yeah,
things that are timeless.
Been around for...
Yep, exactly.
Correct.
Yep.
So, another question. What man-made structure will still be here in 8,000 years?
I guess the pyramids or
exactly.
Stonehenge, things like that.
Correct. Yep. Not the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which has only been around for 250 years. It's
no.
Something's been around for 8,000 years. So, Stu, what crypto will still be here in 15 years?
Bitcoin.
Correct, because it's been around for 15 years. And incidentally, Stu, what's the age of the US currency? The latest definition of the United States.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say, so the US dollar, I would mark it around 150 years. Am I around the mark there?
Incorrect. The latest definition of the latest United States dollar asset. It changed multiple times.
Oh, so you're talking like, you know, once the US got off the gold standard, that sort of thing. So like, you know, T-bills, and is that sort of what you're referring to?
Yeah, so the latest version of the United States dollar, which fundamentally changed. So the last time it changed, how old is it?
Look, I would put it at 1971, I think, when the US got off the gold standard. That's what I would say.
Correct. So the United States dollar has changed many times. So do you know roughly the history of the United States dollar?
Oh, I wouldn't put me on the spot with that one, but I know enough. Yeah. Can you give us the breakdown?
Yeah, so the turn of the century, it was a gold IOU. Literally, you could the US had about at least 50 dozens of banks where you could walk in with your gold and they would issue a slip. And these gold notes were different. Some had convertibilities, others didn't. They all had different amounts. But you could, because you didn't want to lug around your gold, right? So you would travel around on horseback and with your gold IOU notes, deposit notes. And then the Federal Reserve was established between 1910 to 1915. And it sought to standardize all these gold slips, gold IOU notes, in a single federal gold note. And that ran its course, and the US accumulated a lot of gold through the Second World War, all the gold that was fleeing Europe, and the US weren't really involved in the Second World War until towards the end, so they didn't have to spend much money on it, whereas all of Europe was going bankrupt over the Second World War. And the USD was established as a global reserve asset at a conference in the early 1930s. So basically everyone agreed that the USD would be the global reserve. And at that point, that the wording around USD was changed to be just purely a gold slip, to then incorporating the debt of the United States, because now it was going to be exported to the world. So that was the first fundamental change of the United States dollar. And then Executive Order 6102 basically made gold ownership illegal, because the US wanted to export as much of its dollar as possible, but it didn't have enough gold. So it made gold ownership illegal, and it basically made everyone deposit gold into Federal Reserve banks. So the US tried to quickly accumulate, and they actually accumulated 27% of gold at the time. Wild. Through basically just an executive act. And that continued its course until finally they ran out of gold, but they still want to be exporting the United States dollars around the world. So Robert Nixon nixed the gold standard, 1971, essentially making forever decoupling the USD away from gold and just making it only backed by the decree of the US government. So that was a fundamental change in the United States dollars. So it's actually only been around for 50 years. So there you go. So the latest version of one of the most important assets in the world is only 50 years old.
So then I guess, tying that then to crypto or Bitcoin even, what role does then Bitcoin or another crypto play in that space? The US government, inflates their currency, they monetize their debt, that sort of thing. It weakens the US dollar. What's the role then for cryptocurrency to step in and protect people's wealth?
Yeah, so that's a big question there. So Bitcoin allows anyone to store value across time and space. And a lot of currencies are being weaponized, and they essentially, the managers of the currencies create one-way valves. So they essentially make it very difficult to hold and use it. A massive example of this was a year ago, the United States government zeroing out the collateral of the Russian state holding US treasuries, which is wild, because until that point, if you held US treasuries, it was deemed a very safe asset. No one's going to take that off you. And the US government literally just just seized US treasuries off the Russian government. For whatever reason, it's irrelevant, but the US has weaponized their currency to basically exert control over foreign policy, which means people are less likely wanting to hold that asset because of under the threat of having it seized. So it questions the idea of sovereignty as, do you actually own that asset if someone can take it off you forcefully or zero it out? And like even owning property. So a lot of people in Australia think property is theirs and no one's going to take it off them. But you don't own property. You simply have a line item in a ledger somewhere that attributes that property title to you. But the property itself is actually an entry into a ledger. And do you even know where that ledger is? Do you even know who gets to write and change those? It's the titles office in your local state. But, that could be corrupted. I mean, there's many cases around the world where governments have basically zeroed out the lines of people who own property. So the idea that you own something is actually flawed. Most assets, you actually own a privilege to that title. You don't actually fundamentally own that asset. Bitcoin is take for example gold. If you hold a bar of gold, is it your gold or is it just the person who holds it? So someone can walk down the street with a $10 spanner, knock you over the head, and take the gold out of your hands. Now they own the gold because they're the ones who are holding it. So it really makes you question what actually is holdership or ownership of an asset. Bitcoin is the only asset that fundamentally gives you a sovereign right of ownership. Not US treasuries, not the cash in your wallet, the gold in your hand, or the property on your title. Bitcoin is the only asset we've ever had where you fundamentally own it and nobody can seize it off you. So if you own a single Bitcoin, which is 100 grand Aussie, there is no one, not even the entire might of the United States government, can move that Bitcoin away from you, spend it without your permission, which is absolutely wild. So Bitcoin is the only true asset. Just think about that, and I'll leave it there. What do you think, Stu?
That's pretty good. Well, so I guess how do you then? It's a good segue into security. How do you assess the security of a Bitcoin? What are the main threats? Are there any threats? Is it quantum computing? Is there anything sort of looking forward? That a Bitcoin or a crypto holder should be concerned about.
Sure. So let's talk about one or two of those. There's probably two threats front of mind that get regularly mentioned. One is, government's going to ban Bitcoin. So let's just deal with that immediately. You cannot ban Bitcoin because Bitcoin is information and it's not actually money. It's just a certain type of information that's really good at being scarce. And because it's really good at being scarce and giving its holder of that information sovereign rights, it's actually then really good at storing value. Therefore, it has monetary properties. Therefore, we can treat it as money. Does it make sense? So it is information, which is scarce and gives you sovereign rights, which gives it an ability to store value across time and space, which confers upon it monetary premium, which we then call money, right? So that's how you kind of unpack it. So where in that kind of onion with many layers can a single state in the world exert itself? So a state can't stop the flow of information. One. So if you think about what Bitcoin is, it's just information. The state cannot stop the flow of money. Just think about any critical information out there in the world. Can it be stopped in a decentralized network? As in, I'm holding on to information like, I don't know, the color purple, and I'm trying to tell you, Stu, about this color, which is purple. Can the state impose itself on us to stop me ever telling you about the color purple? I'm literally telling you right now about the color purple via the internet. If this internet channel were to go down, I could call you on my phone. If that fails, I could fly to Darwin and literally walk into your room and tell you about the color purple. Or if that fails, I can jump on Starlink and send you a picture of the image of the color purple. Does it make sense? Yeah. So there's absolutely no way to stop me telling you about the color purple. Right? If I really wanted to get you that information. Right? And so no state can impose itself on that. In fact, the more valuable the information is, the more it wants to get to you. So the state can't stop the flow of information. Can the state interfere with the monetary? Remember I said Bitcoin is information, which is just scarce and has sovereign rights. Therefore, it's really good at storing value. So then can the state interfere with those properties? Can it stop it being scarce? Absolutely not. Because the scarcity properties of Bitcoin are enforced by the protocol itself, which is distributed. So the state would need to stop every single node in this network, and there's hundreds of thousands of nodes all across the world. You could take down maybe like 1,000 of them, but can you take down 100,000 of them? And what would stop them from popping back up again? Makes sense. So it's like this. You can't stop that. So you can't interfere with the monetary properties of the network. So therefore, it's impossible to be banned. So we'll just talk about it right there and then. It's just not possible for it to be banned. And the last 15 years has shown that Bitcoin has Trojan horsed itself into the financial system for it to essentially never be it's everywhere. It cannot be extracted. I mean, the App Store can ban crypto apps temporarily until a new administration takes in. Back in 2013, you could not download Bitcoin wallets on the iPhone App Store. Did you? But in 2016, it was possible, right? Because the needs of the people wanted that. So, especially now with the ETFs being launched into the US financial system, there's just no going back from that. So the answer is, will governments ban it? And the answer to that would be, it's too late. It's not possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if...
the second... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if governments, for some reason, do decide to ban it or, try to I guess regulate's probably the wrong word because it's decentralized, will that can that impact on, I understand that there's this tidal wave of money invested in Bitcoin, but will regulation by government or the apprehension from government to accept Bitcoin prevent your mum and pop investors, like prevent your mainstream investors from getting involved, and until I guess there's no other option?
So Bitcoin as a money does two things. One, it stores value across time and space, but also allows you to buy things. But for now, I don't believe Bitcoin is very good at enabling you to buy and sell daily things. Mainly because as it's an emerging asset class with huge amounts of volatility. From the perspective that we're using like the Aussie dollar, US or United States dollar to measure value, so it looks like Bitcoin is very volatile. On a segue, that's not the case. Bitcoin, if you own one Bitcoin, you actually own 1/21 millionth unit of an asset, which could represent the entire world's economic output. So it's actually not volatile at all when you value it in Bitcoin terms. But anyway, getting back to it. But today most people value Bitcoin in USD terms or Aussie dollar terms. So it appears to be volatile. So from that perspective, it's not actually a good asset to be buying and selling things on the daily. Mm-hmm. So your question is, could governments slow down the fiat on-off ramps into Bitcoin and therefore erode its properties being a money? Well, I'll say it's not really relevant because nobody really uses it to buy and sell stuff. That's quite rare. People use it to store value across time.
Right. So it's 10 years. So do you see it eventually becoming an apparatus to buy your coffees, buy your newspaper, pay for meals, or is that just not crypto's function or Bitcoin's function going forward?
So to do that, we need to be post-Hyperbitcoinization. So Hyperbitcoinization is a state of monetary existence that everything in the world gets priced in Bitcoin. And that's probably 20, 30 years away. To get there, let me just quickly explain. So Bitcoin is, 1.5 trillion today as a total asset class. It's actually not even bigger than the equity value of Apple or Saudi Aramco. It's actually less valuable than that, so it's actually a tiny asset. People look at Bitcoin and go, oh, it's so valuable, 100 grand. It must be huge. It's actually really small, based on what it wants to do. In the next 5 to 10 years, I believe it will flip gold. It will demonetize gold. So that's a 10x right there. So 100 grand today, Bitcoin will be $1 million by before 2030. As it demonetizes gold, it steals all of the monetary premium of gold, because gold actually is something like 95% monetary premium. If you just valued gold based on its commodity value, it should only be worth 200 billion and not 14 trillion. So all that monetary premium is going to leave gold and go into Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin will then chase down equity value and then property value and then cash value and demonetize those assets, because a lot of those assets are storing a lot of monetary premium that they shouldn't be. So that's the case for Bitcoin to become a $100 trillion class. So today it's a $1 trillion asset class. In the next 10 years, it'll become a $10 trillion asset class. In the next 20, 30 years, it'll become a $100 trillion asset class. And then finally, in a world where sovereigns are acquiring Bitcoin in huge amounts, it will become a 1 quadrillion asset class, which if you look at the total value of monetary assets, including derivations of monetary assets, it's something of the order of 500 trillion to a quadrillion dollars. So that's where Bitcoin could get in the next 20, 30 years. At that point, when most sovereigns in the world are utilizing Bitcoin to monetize their debt, then every single citizen will have a Bitcoin wallet, L1, L2, L3, custodial, non-custodial. And at that point, people will be buying their coffee in Bitcoin, because everything will be priced in Bitcoin. The coffee will be 100 sats, or your car will be 10,000 sats, 100,000 sats. Does it make sense?
I don't know.
So
I don't know what a sat is. Are you able to explain a
because
sat just quickly for our listeners, or is it too complicated?
Yeah, cool. So No, we'll talk about it. So one Bitcoin, what we think is Bitcoin, is actually 100 million units of the base unit of Bitcoin, which we call Satoshis or sats. So if you look at Bitcoin, it's 100 grand. It's actually 100 million units of a thing called Satoshis, which we just call sats. So we can call Bitcoin a Bitcoin at 100 grand, or we can actually call it based on the Satoshi units, which is 100 million of them per Bitcoin. So we can actually move the decimal point all the way to the end. So 100 sats is 1 millionth of a Bitcoin. Doesn't make sense.
Right. So what you're saying is people should be investing in Bitcoin yesterday?
No, not investing. Remember I said 10 minutes ago, do not invest in Bitcoin. You are adopting Bitcoin.
You're adopting Bitcoin.
So, no,
and once you're in, you're not getting out again. That's what you're saying. You're in.
You should adopt Bitcoin to store your value across time and space. Yep. And you should never leave.
Right.
Why would you leave from... You're holding an inferior asset today, which is cash, property, cars. Stump those and use Bitcoin to store your value. Because your value is your finite time multiplied by your finite effort. And you get to convert that into an asset, which is itself is finite, Bitcoin. Cash is not finite. Property is not finite. Cars are not finite, right? Watches are not finite. The only finite asset in the world is Bitcoin. Not even gold is finite. I mean, what happens when Jeff Bezos starts mining Psyche 16 with his rockets? The amount of gold in Psyche 16, which is basically an asteroid satellite circling Saturn, I think, is 1,000 times the above ground supply of gold on Earth. One rocket could bring back enough gold to basically send gold to zero. Wild, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely wild. There's enough gold in the oceans today to 10x the above supply of gold. Gold itself doubles in its above ground supply every 60 years. Did you know that?
Nope.
So the total amount of gold above the ground doubles in supply every 60 years. Wild. People use gold to store value when it's not finite. What I tell people to do is do not hold assets that require you to be in a position where you're short humanity. And what I mean by that is, over the last billions of years and the last thousands of years in particular, humanity has demonstrated it has this really innate ability to solve the adversity of the universe. You present a problem, it solves it. Right? That's how we survive day to day. So we have this really incredible ability to innovate and solve using technology, which has been increasing in a compounding ways for thousands of years. So don't bet against our ability to solve the problems of supply, which means you should be long humanity, not short it. So some assets, for you to think are good at storing value, require you to be in a position where you're actually short humanity itself. You're short technology. Property is an example. Gold is another example. All right. Property is a supply-demand curve that can basically go to zero, as in infinite supply and almost zero demand because of technology. We could basically, over the next 10, 20 years, make any place on Earth inhabitable through technology. And we have been doing that. You know, the advent of air conditioning and refrigeration and different building materials allow us to live anywhere we want. I mean, Saudi Arabia rolling out a 200 kilometer long city that's going to be 1 kilometer wide and 1 kilometer tall to fit 20 million people in the middle of the desert, just using hardcore technology, right? So, and we also end up at Mars. Mars is a completely inhospitable place today, but in the future, we could be living there in abundance. So all of property will go to zero because we can basically live anywhere and do anything we want, and using technology to create infinite amounts of livable places. So don't hold property. Holding property is silly. It requires you to be short humanity. And I mentioned gold. To hold gold also requires you to be short technology and short humanity's ability to go and find and mine as much as we want out of Earth, asteroids, universe. So, yeah.
Well, I don't think our federal government got the memo about housing, mate, so we'll have to send them that one. Anyway, we'll turn to the innovation space, and just in your opinion, what sort of applications are you most excited about in this space going forward? Where do we go from here?
Good question. So, first of all, we need to build products and promote them widely that allow people to move the wealth into this asset class, essentially allow them to adopt it in an easy way. So I'm a big fan of products like CoinSpot, Thor Wallet, Crypto.com, Binance that allow you that are connected to your fiat accounts, solve the banking problems, and allow you to move your cash quickly in. Basically, dump your cash, adopt Bitcoin, because cash is essentially infinite. There's monetary asset that nobody has any idea who gets to decide the daily quantities of it. I mean, if you're walking around the streets and you bump into a random person and you ask them any single point, what is the supply of the Aussie dollar? I can literally say you could ask 100 people and 99, or maybe perhaps even 100 of them would say, I have no idea. I mean, Stu, what is the supply of the Aussie dollar right now?
Oh, wow.
In units.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't even know where to begin, because what is there? There's M1 and M2 and all that sort of thing.
Just guess it.
Oh.
The number of units of Aussie dollar. Just the number of units, like the circulating cap.
I'll say 2 trillion. I've just got no idea.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty close. Like the first thing you said was like, well, how are we defining it? So there's like 4 levels of definitions. M1, M2, M3, M4. M1 is basically your cash accounts. So if you sum up all the paper cash plus everyone's cash accounts, you're looking at just over 1 trillion. If you then start adding people's credit accounts and deposit accounts, blah blah blah, then it gets. But it's about 2 trillion. But as an aside, what was the supply 10 years ago?
Well, I know after COVID, things just went bonkers. I think that was sort of a global trend. I'll say 300 million units. 300 billion units. Sorry.
10 years ago. No, it's about 1 trillion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
10 years ago.
I thought.
So, but anyway. But we've doubled. We've roughly doubled in the last 7 to 10 years.
Right.
In supply of Aussie dollar. But, so I mean, that right there, that explains inflation. Literally right there. So if you think about it, the supply of the Aussie dollar has doubled in the last 7 to 10 years. It's very difficult to even get an accurate number of the Aussie dollar, right? But has Australia's economic output doubled as well in the last 10 years? Because if the supply of Aussie dollar and the economic value of Australia has matched in growth, there's no inflation, because $1 will still buy you 1 unit of Australia's economic output, in which case there wouldn't be any inflation. That's the whole point of a well-managed fiat currency, is to increase its supply at the same rate as economic growth. But there's 3 things that dictate economic growth, so the economic output of a country. More people doing more things more effectively, right? So has the supply of Australia, has the population of Australia's labour force doubled in the last 10 years? The answer is no. Okay, so we don't have more people doing more. We don't have more people. Have they done more things over the last 10 years? As in, have they done more things in the day? Do they work more? No. Lunch hours get longer, time off gets more prevalent. You can take a mental health day. You can, there's maternal leave, paternal leave, blah blah blah. So people are working less. So we have slightly more people working, but working less. Last thing, are they more effective? Are they utilizing technology to be more effective in their working hours? Yes and no. So things like social media has destroyed a lot of productivity, but things like, just like Microsoft Excel or the iPhone, allowing you to have even just a work calendar on your phone. Technology has allow people to do things more effectively, but also technology has introduced things like social media that have counteracted that balance. Anyway, at the end of the day, no, we do not have 2 times the economic output in the last 10 years, yet the supply of the Aussie dollar has doubled in the last 10 years. So that should right there explain inflation, why things are more expensive. Anyway, so that's why I'm very passionate about allowing people to exit an extremely poorly managed financial system into a much better financial system. So when you have a group of Reserve Bank governors managing the supply of the Aussie dollar and trying to match our economic output, Bitcoin just has a whole bunch of code that was set in stone 15 years ago and enforced by a massive global network, which is extremely large. And we just don't have Muppets running Bitcoin. We actually just have hardcore code that hasn't ever changed. So I'm passionate about fiat inflow. So that's why helping projects like Thor Wallet and a bunch of other ones allow people to get their cash to move the wealth into crypto. So that's one aspect. Yeah.
So governments, in a sense, are almost, governments and central bankers are, in a sense, almost playing into the hands of people like yourself that are, at the cutting edge of crypto, and essentially, I don't want to say throwing it away, but they're sort of, because they're managing their economy so poorly, they're almost, giving economies to crypto in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, a well-managed financial system should have a good monetary asset. As an example, Switzerland has a well-managed financial system. So I'd happily hold Switzerland francs, right? They do a good job. Aussie dollars, well-managed? Debatable. USD, well-managed? Look, it's United States dollars, because it's globally available, there's always a demand for the asset. All right. So the United States dollar can be poorly managed, but still valuable because everyone needs it.
What's the reserve currency status, right?
Right. Correct. Yeah. So they can basically export it to the world. When they do silly things like zeroing out the treasury accounts of the Russian state, then calls into question, or kicking countries in the Middle East off it and like seizing and blocking SWIFT payments, blah, blah, blah. That's when it becomes weaponized, and that's when people start losing faith in it. But I mean, Australia doesn't have that liberty, that privilege of exporting its dollars easily around the world. I mean, some countries in Asia will buy Aussie dollars or import it, but that's about it. Our trading partners are on. So Australia has to be a well-managed financial system for it to maintain its purchasing power in the global markets. Unfortunately, it's not a well-managed financial system. I mean, we were parity with the USD 6 or 7 years ago, right? That was 1 for 1. I mean, on the flip side is if you devalue a currency, then you affect the export-import markets. So people are more likely to, or you're more likely to import, I guess. So it's a tool, it's a lever, but do we get to be part of the input there? Do we get to tell Reserve Bank governors how we would like it? I mean, most people in Australia don't really care about the import-export markets. They care about the price of the Woolies bill every week, right?
Yep.
Most people in Australia, I would say. So that shouldn't that be the focus then? Anyway, so that's, yeah, like a well-managed financial system. Bitcoin is only a compelling asset to store value because everything else sucks. That's literally it. If the Aussie dollar was a better asset, it would be fine to use as a monetary asset, but it's not. It's not well managed.
So it's like the argument against capitalism. Capitalism is a terrible system except for all the others. So you could say Bitcoin is a terrible asset except for all the others.
Yeah, I mean, the necessity of Bitcoin is because all the others suck. All the other monetary assets we have aren't very good. And so that drives the demand for Bitcoin. On your little punt at capitalism there, so unfortunately, capitalism as we view it is not actually true capitalism.
Agreed.
Most people's awareness of what capitalism is massively skewed because
Cronyism.
the capitalism we have in place today is that most people think of capitalism like, you know, how Facebook owning Instagram and WhatsApp and Saudi Aramco having huge amounts of oil value because of the oil and blah, blah, blah. And Apple having, you know, a $2 trillion market share. Capitalism is skewed because of onerous regulation or regulatory capture. So it's not actually true capitalism. The regulation in place gives economies of scale to these large companies, which provides a centralizing force. Like it creates monopolies rather than a true capitalist environment shouldn't create monopolies. It should be basically like anyone should be able to have the ability to sell a good or service at a premium into a market that demands it and capture value and continue to capture value as long as they keep producing a good or service at a premium, right? And selling into market. So there's no centralizing forces there. In fact, that there shouldn't be economies of scale. The only reason why large companies have economies of scale, which means as they get bigger, they can get even bigger because they can access the costs reduce, is because of regulatory moats that are put in place to allow big companies to stay big. And so they're like this kind of skewed capitalism that people are familiar with today is not actually true capitalism. True capitalism is very distributed, very decentralized, allows anyone to attempt to sell any product at any given time. That's true capitalism.
Yep. And just for the record, pro capitalist here, very much, or free. I'm pro free market because I think capitalism was a Marxist term coined by Karl Marx. But anyway, that's probably a good segue, I think, to, you know, you're talking about the US dollar and fiat in general. If we turn our sort of lens domestically now, I think the US dollar recently strengthened somewhat unexpectedly against a weakening Aussie dollar. You know, probably stoking fears of sticky inflation and the RBA potentially raising rates further. How do you think that will impact crypto, if at all?
Yeah, I mean, post-COVID, it was to deal with all the stimmy checks that went out into the world and the massive oversupply of money. Rates had to be driven up, and that was driven up primarily from the US money side. So they instant kicks it off. Everyone in the world is good. Basically followed, and as they need to. The rates of the US markets being pretty flat. So they were aggressively raised to, you know, around 5%, and they've been pretty flat the last 6 months. I was expecting it to start being dropped this year because we've got to lead up to the US federal election and the president who's maintaining, you know, the administration into the election is going to try and pump the markets. So the first thing to do is like drop rates. But on the flip side, we have actually seen it because of like fears of war and stuff like that. We have actually seen in going into this year, inflation spike a little bit more. So if anything, that will delay the drop in rates, but ultimately the next move will be a drop in rates. It's just a matter of when, not if, but when. So we may see marginally an increase at the moment because of the market's very skittish and inflation has popped up a little bit going into this year, but it's not going to be long term. I think we still will see a reduction in rates this year, and that will kickstart the markets again and free up a lot of liquidity, and people will go risk on. Right now, the last 12 months, people have gone risk off because of raising rates. So I think they'll start going risk on towards the end of the year as we go into the US election. The Aussie side of it, we just follow what the US do. We can't not follow. If we go counter to them, we just don't have the buying power to pull off a move like that. So we'll forget about what the Aussies are doing. Just look at what the US are doing. Whatever they do, we'll follow.
Alrighty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I guess for those prospective, you know, in crypto investors, you know, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting to learn about crypto and and the technology in general. How, what sort of some of the tools that they could use? I think you mentioned some before, like Thor Wallet and those type of things. How could your prospective investor, adopter, get my syntax correct, get involved?
Yeah. So the first thing you should do is build a thesis about this asset class. So don't even bother pulling out CoinSpot or CoinMarketCap until you've read the Bitcoin white paper. It's only 9 pages long, right? Download on your phone and read it. It's going to take you 1 hour. Read the Bitcoin white paper first. Build a really good thesis about this asset. And build a conviction on that thesis, right? So before you have that thesis, and my thesis has always been that it's better at storing value across time and space than any other asset that's ever gone before it. That thesis will allow you to weather the upcoming volatility. Bitcoin is only going to become more volatile because more of it's going to get pulled off active markets and put in cold storage, and the market's going to become more skittish about it because it becomes a more critical asset. It's only going to become more volatile. The only way you can stomach volatility is by having a strong thesis, and it's up to you to build that thesis. And there's lots of resources out there. Just jump on the internet and just start having a crack. So build that thesis first. Decide how Bitcoin can help you store your value across time and space. And then the next aspect would then be to dump your dollars and acquire this asset safely. So I recommend most people to just pull up CoinSpot, which has really good fiat on-off rails, and start acquiring it. But do not hold your assets in CoinSpot or exchanges, because you are not actually holding that asset. You're holding an IOU token. So while you can actually buy it easily on CoinSpot or in a reputable Aussie exchange, immediately withdraw it and use wallets, on-chain wallets like Trust Wallet, Thor Wallet. I most typically tell people just to use Trust Wallet because it's easy and it's easy to use. So yeah, do that. Build a thesis, decide how Bitcoin can help you, and act on it in a safe way.
Okay. And just to close, do you have any weekly buys and sells? Are we getting that sort of into the weeds? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so where we're at the moment, we've just had the halving, and the last 3 months we saw the US ETF, exchange traded funds, launch for Bitcoin. We had 9 of them, and I think they accumulated like $20 billion worth of Bitcoin in 3 months. So they basically catered for a lot of pent-up demand. Bitcoin did a big run, and now it's cooling off from that. We've got a bit of skittish market. People don't know what the next move is. But personally, I think now is an excellent time to be acquiring the asset. May and June should be strong months, either maintain this level or slightly rise. So I think it's a great time to start, spend a week to build a thesis, start moving in, acquire Bitcoin, and hold. This year should see a 2x in the asset, so 60 grand to 120 grand this year. And next year should do another 2x before we do a blow off top Q3, Q4. So we're, potentially 240K next year from start to finish. Plus or minus, and who knows, because anything can happen. But I think we're a bit of a grind at the moment, a grinding market. Excellent time to enter. And the first asset everyone should be acquiring is Bitcoin. And I'll just leave it at that for this week. And until we start thinking. In a grinding market or a bearish market, the only asset you want to be acquiring is Bitcoin. And I'll explain that on probably another podcast.
Okay. Thanks, JP. Unless you've got any final words, we'll call it there. Thanks, mate.
Cool, man. We'll see you next
time. Cheers. Bye. Thanks, everyone.